The grand lobby of Sterling Industries gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Marcus Webb pushed his mop across the marble floor, his weathered hands moving in the same rhythm they had for the past 3 years. At 52, he'd grown invisible to the executives who rushed past him each morning, their expensive shoes clicking against the floors he'd just cleaned. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from. Tonight was different. The company's annual gala was in full swing, and Marcus had been asked to stay late to clean up after the event. He didn't mind. The overtime meant he could buy his daughter, Emma, the art supplies she'd been eyeing at the store. Even though she was gone now, resting peacefully in Greenwood Cemetery, he still visited her grave every Sunday, with fresh flowers and stories about his week. "Hey, Janitor!" A voice cut through his thoughts. Marcus looked up to see Derek Chen, the VP of Marketing, swaying slightly with a champagne glass in his hand. A group of suited executives stood behind him, smirking. "You know what would make this party actually interesting?" Marcus said nothing, his grip tightening on the mop handle. "I bet you can't even play that piano over there," Derek continued, gesturing toward the magnificent Steinway grand piano that sat in the corner of the lobby, a centerpiece that was more decoration than instrument. "Come on, entertain us. Show us what the help can do." Laughter rippled through the group. Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks, but before he could respond, a woman's voice rang out. "I think that's an excellent idea, Derek." Catherine Sterling, the CEO, emerged from the crowd, her silver hair catching the light. She was known for her sharp business acumen and sharper tongue. "But let's make it interesting. If our friend here can play something worthwhile, you spend the next month scrubbing toilets alongside him. If he can't, he gets a bonus for being a good sport." The crowd hushed. Derek's smirk faltered, but he nodded, too proud to back down. Marcus stood frozen. It had been 4 years since he'd touched a piano. 4 years since the accident that took his wife, Sarah, and left Emma fighting for her life. 4 years since he'd sold their home, their car, everything they owned to pay for experimental treatments that ultimately couldn't save his little girl. The piano in their living room, the one where he'd taught Emma to play, had been the last thing to go. "I don't think," Marcus began. "Please," Catherine said, and something in her eyes wasn't mockery. It was curiosity. "Indulge us." Marcus looked down at his janitorial uniform, at the calluses on his hands from years of physical labor. Then he thought of Emma, of how she'd giggle when he'd play Chopin for her before bedtime, of how she'd rest her small head on his shoulder and say, "Daddy, you make the piano sing." He set down his mop. The walk to the piano felt like miles. The crowd parted, some still chuckling, others watching with mild interest. Marcus sat on the bench, his hands hovering over the keys. They were perfectly white, pristine, so unlike the yellowed keys of his old, upright piano that had survived. 2 moves and countless practice sessions. He closed his eyes and let his fingers find their home. The first note rang out, pure and clear. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. It was the piece he'd been playing the night Sarah died. The piece that had been interrupted by the phone call from the hospital. He'd never finished it then. But Emma had loved it, had requested it every night during her illness, and he'd played it on his phone for her when they could no longer afford the piano. Now, his fingers moved across the keys with a life of their own. The muscle memory returned instantly, but it was more than technique. Each note carried weight, emotion, story. The melody wept and soared, whispered and cried. His hands, rough from years of cleaning, coaxed impossible beauty from the instrument. The lobby fell silent except for the music. The chatter stopped. The clinking of glasses ceased. Even the waitstaff paused mid-step. Marcus poured everything into the performance. His grief over Sarah, who never got to see Emma's 10th birthday. His anguish over Emma, who'd fought so bravely against leukemia. Who'd smiled even when the pain was unbearable. Who'd made him promise to keep playing even after she was gone. His shame at having to sell the piano, at working as a janitor when he'd once been a concert pianist with a promising career. His loneliness in the small apartment, where silence had replaced laughter and music. But the piece also held their joy. The Sunday mornings when Sarah would make pancakes while he and Emma played duets, the sound of their laughter harmonizing with the music, the feeling of completeness he'd once known. The final notes hung in the air, delicate as glass. Before fading into profound silence, Marcus opened his eyes. His vision was blurred with tears he didn't remember shedding. The first thing he saw was Catherine Sterling, the unflappable CEO, with tears streaming down her face. She wasn't alone. Throughout the crowd, handkerchiefs dabbed at eyes. Derek Chen stood frozen, his earlier smugness replaced by something that looked like shame. "Who are you?" Catherine whispered, approaching the piano. "Who are you, really?" Marcus cleared his throat. "I'm Marcus Webb, ma'am. I'm the night janitor. But I used to be a pianist. A long time ago." "Used to be?" An older gentleman stepped forward, his tuxedo marked with a prestigious Arts Foundation pin. "Sir, what you just played, that wasn't the performance of someone who used to be anything. That was transcendent. I've attended concerts at Carnegie Hall that didn't touch what you just did." "Why are you working as a janitor?" Catherine asked, her voice gentle. Marcus took a breath. And then, for the first time since Emma's death, he told someone his story. He spoke of his wife, his daughter, the accident, the medical bills that consumed his savings, and then his career. He explained how he'd taken any job he could find to pay for Emma's treatments, how he'd sold his piano, how he'd walked away from everything he loved in the hope of saving the person he loved most, and how in the end it hadn't been enough. "I haven't played in 4 years, he said quietly. "Tonight was the first time since Emma's funeral. I couldn't before. It hurt too much." The lobby remained silent, but it was a different silence now, respectful, awed. Catherine pulled out her phone and made a call. "Michael?" "Yes, I know it's late. I need you to set up a scholarship fund. Full ride, music education, for underprivileged children. I want it called the Emma Webb Memorial Scholarship." She looked at Marcus. "If that's all right with you." Marcus couldn't speak. He nodded, tears flowing freely now. "And Marcus," Catherine continued, "I'd like to offer you a position. Director of our corporate arts program. We need someone who understands that art isn't about prestige. It's about humanity. Someone who knows that the janitor might have more to teach us than the VP. She glanced meaningfully at Derek, who had quietly disappeared into the crowd. "I don't know what to say," Marcus managed. "Say you'll play for us again," the older gentleman said. "Say you'll let the world hear what we just heard." Marcus looked at the piano, this beautiful instrument that had given voice to his grief and his love. He thought of Emma, of how proud she'd be, of how she'd always believed in him, even when he'd stopped believing in himself. "I'll play," he said. "For Emma, for everyone who thinks their story is over, for everyone who's forgotten what they're capable of." That night, videos of Marcus's performance spread across social media. The story of the janitor who moved a CEO to tears became international news. But more importantly, Marcus began teaching piano to children who couldn't afford lessons, playing in hospitals for patients who needed hope, and showing the world that greatness doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It often arrives quietly, wearing a janitor's uniform, carrying a mop, waiting for someone to ask it to play. 3 months later, Marcus gave his first public concert in 15 years. The venue was packed. In the front row sat an empty seat with a single rose, reserved for Emma. And when Marcus played, everyone in that audience understood that they weren't just hearing music. They were witnessing love made audible, grief transformed into beauty, and a father's promise to his daughter that her memory would live on in every note. Because music, like love, never truly dies. It waits. And when the time is right, it reminds us who we really are. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Help us spread these powerful reminders that everyone has a story worth hearing, and that compassion can change lives. Your support means the world to us, and helps us continue bringing you stories that inspire, uplift, and restore faith in humanity. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another heartwarming tale. Thank you for being part of our community of kindness.